Hello and welcome to my science tutorials. In today's video, I want to look at the subtraction of number bases. Alright, so let's proceed and look at the first example that we have in this tutorial. So we are to evaluate 11011 base 2 minus 101 base 2. Okay, so this is the problem that we have. So let's proceed to subtract these numbers. So we have 11011 in base 2. Then we also have 101 base 2. And we are subtracting. Alright, so let's look at that. Now this is very easy. When it comes to number bases, subtraction is quite easier. So we have 1 minus 1, that will give us 0. We have 1 minus 0 will give us 1 because we are subtracting nothing out of something. And then we have here 0 minus 1. It's basically impossible for us to do that subtraction, so we have to borrow. Now if we borrow from here, we'll be left with 0, and whatever we borrow from here, that one becomes 2 since we are borrowing in base 2. So we have 2 over here. Now that 2 minus 1 will give us 1. So now if we come on over here, we have 0 over here minus nothing, that will give us 0, and then the 1 minus nothing, that will give us 1. So our answer over here is 10110 base 2. Now the only difference here is that when we borrowed 1 from the 1 over here and it's left with 0, the one that we borrowed, when we were bringing it to the 0 over here, we changed it to the base, because when we are subtracting in base 10, which is the normal subtraction that we normally do, we always say when we borrow, it becomes 10 and we add it to the previous number. And in this case, we are subtracting in base 2, so whatever we borrow becomes 2, and then we send it and add it to the previous number. All right, so let's look at another example. So we are to evaluate 1341 base 5 minus 242 base 5. All right, let's proceed to look at the solution to this problem. So I have 1341 base 5 and then 242 base 5. We are doing the subtraction, so let's proceed to look at the solution to this particular problem. Now we have 1 minus 2 here, which is impossible. We can subtract 2 from 1, so we borrow. So I'll borrow 1 from here, I'll be left with 3, and the 1 that I borrow becomes 5. So if I add that 5 to the 1 over here, it becomes 6. So I now have 6 at the top over here. So 6 minus 2, that will give me 4. So I write down my 4. Now I have 3 here. 3 minus 4, that is impossible. So I have to borrow again. I borrow 1 from here, I'm left with 2. And the 1 that I borrow, I will not add it to the 3 over here. It becomes, I will not add that 1 as 10, but I'll add it as 5 since we are dealing in base 5. So that 1 becomes 5 plus the 3 over here, then it becomes 8. So I now have 8 over here. So 8 minus 4, that will give me 4. So I write down the 4 over here. So I am left with 2 over here. So 2 minus 2, that will give me 0. And then I maintain the 1 over here, and that becomes my final answer. So if I subtract 242 from 1341, and they are all in base 5, I will get 1044 base 5 as my answer. All right, so let's proceed to look at another example. So we have, or we are to evaluate 523 base 7 minus 65 base 7. Okay, so let's proceed to look at the solution to this problem. So I have 523 in base 7 and then 65 in base 7. Very good. So let's proceed to look at the solution to this problem. Let me maintain the base 7 over here. So I'm to subtract 5 from 3, which is impossible. So I'll borrow 1 from the 2 over here. Then I'll be left with 1 over here. Now the 1 that I borrow becomes 7 plus the 3 over here, then it becomes 10. So I now have 10 here. 10 minus 5, that will give me 5. So I have 5 over here. So I'm left with 1 over here. So 1 minus 6 is impossible. So I have to borrow again. So I borrow 1 from the 5 over here. I'm left with 4. That one that I borrow, because we are dealing in base 7, becomes 7. So the 7 plus 1 over here becomes 8. So I now have 8. 8 minus 6, that will give me 2. So I have 2 over here. And then the 4 I have at the top over here, since there is nothing here, I will bring it down here. So my answer becomes 425 base 7 as my final answer. All right, let's proceed to look at another example. So in this example, we were given 5162 in base 7, and they did the subtraction for us. So they have 2644 here, also in base 7, and we were told that the answer was 2 asterisk 15 base 7. So we were asked to find the missing number, which is the asterisk over here. So what is the value of the asterisk? That is what we do not know. So what this means is that we are supposed to do the subtraction ourselves and then find the answer or the missing number over here. So let's proceed and look at that. So I have 5162 base 7 and then 2644 also in base 7. We are subtracting. So let's proceed to look at that. Now I have 2 here minus 4. That is impossible, so I need to borrow. So I borrow 1 from the 6 over here. I am left with 5. That 1 becomes 7, and I add that 7 to the 2 over here, so I get 9. The 1 that I borrow becomes 7 because we are dealing in base 7. So I have 9 at the top here. 9 minus 4, that will give me 5. Okay, so already we have the first value looking exactly as what they have in their subtraction, or what we have over here. Now I have 5 over here, so 5 minus 4, that will give me 1 exactly, so that is also correct. Now I have here 1 minus 6. It is impossible for me to subtract 6 out of 1, so I have to borrow from the 5 over here. So I borrow, I'm left with 4. The 1 that I borrow becomes 7, and if I add that 7 to the 1 over here, I will be getting 8. So I have 8 here. 8 minus 6, that will give me 8 minus 6, that will give me 2 over here. And then I have 4 left over here. 4 minus 2, that will also give me 2. So my answer is 2215. And if I compare it to what I've been given here, it means this value over here is the asterisk. Therefore, the value of the asterisk is 2, as we've been asked to find. All right, let's look at one more example for this particular problem. All right, so we have to subtract 122 base 3 from 1001 base 3. All right, now if we look at the sentence we've been given, they say subtract 122 base 3 from 1001 base 3. From means that this is the bigger number and we are subtracting 122 from that. So I'll write the 1001 base 3 first, then I subtract the 122 base 3 from that. So I have my subtraction sign over here. Now if you look at this, we have to subtract 2 from the 1 over here, which is actually impossible, so I need to borrow. But I have 0 here, I have 0 here. I can borrow from the 0, so I have to borrow all the way from here. So if I borrow from here, I'll be left with 0. And that 1 that I borrowed over here will come to the 0 over here. And because we are dealing in base 3, it becomes 3. So here will become 3. Now I have to borrow from the 3 again, so it will be left with 2. And the 1 that I borrow from the 3 becomes 3. And I add to this guy, it becomes 3. And then I need to borrow from the 3 again to this one. So I borrow 1 from here, we are left with 2 here. And that 1 becomes 3. And then the 3 will come here plus the 1 over here. So here becomes 4. Okay. So if you look at this, I have 4 minus 2, that will give me 2. I have here 2 minus 2, that will give me 0. I have here 2 minus 1, that will give me 1. I have here 0, so this is all I have. So my answer is 102 base 3. Now if you look at it, this is how we did the borrowing. So we had 1001, 122, all in base 3. Now we borrowed initially from here, so we are left with 0. And because we are dealing in base 3, whatever we borrowed became 3. So we brought the 3 over here plus the 0 over here, it becomes 3. So that's the 3 we have here. But remember, we are not borrowing onto this number. We want to borrow onto the first digit we have over here. So we need to borrow from the 3 over here again. So when we borrow 1 from here, we are left with 2. But that one that we borrow becomes 3, and then we add it to the 0 over here, it becomes 3. And then from then again, because we want to have the number borrowed onto the 1 over here, we borrow from here again, so we are left with 2, and the one we borrow again becomes 3, and we add it to the 1 over here, and that becomes 4. So that was what I did over here. So now if you do the same subtraction, you get 102 base 3 as your final answer. So thank you so much for watching. This is how we do subtraction in number basis. I hope you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll be talking about multiplication of number basis. So thank you once again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.